Alright, so welcome back. Hi, my name is Jose. For those who are new to my channel, yes, my name is Jose. And I just cut my hair. I cut my own hair. But anyways, so I actually shaved, so I look very different. Pardon the lighting. Sorry, it's a little bad. Okay. Okay. Anyways, so what do you call this? Sorry, I just had a big lunch. So welcome to my channel. I do a bunch of things, like a different many different things. I actually have a lot of gifts and skills that I've acquired from past lives and parallel lives. But mainly what I do is what I love to do with astrology is using asteroids. So micro astrology is what I like to call it. Okay. But I also am new to forms of divination, tarot, oracle cards, hydromancy. There's only one post that I made about it. I've done other things with hydromancy. I just haven't recorded. Um, what do you call this? Runes and I'm trying papyromancy, like working with paper. It's very cute. But anyways, so I wanted to actually add in the previous video, talked about perspective and all that stuff. You can look into my channel. You call literally it's called like what is this one? I think it's called something perspective. I might add it to the end of this video, but you'll see it in my channel. It's the one right before this. I think you'll see it. It's the how the birth chart is about for your perspective, how it's different. But I got into the point where I was talking about how it's enough for a release when you know about someone. Okay, so I did want to add here, by the way, that when it comes to these kind of things, I'm going to go into that later because I didn't want to shock anyone and to be like, oh no, synastry, that's another discipline of astrology. It was like, yeah, we don't have to really go there. I just wanted to say that when it comes to perspective, it is through the charts. Having different charts shows it's proof enough that it's like, oh, right. And it gives you an opportunity to just let that person be as they are, as they do with you, right? Differences, this is the beauty about having differences and uniqueness, right? So we're all in this together. Um, the one thing that came to me actually before today's video, that video, is idea of so I was having a conversation with a close friend of mine, and they were having all this issues with like their perspective of life again goes back to their belief and their sense of like their our inner child stuff, right? But I wanted to tie that into how sometimes we wonder about how we could just get out of that funk or in a rut because that's what they were feeling. Um, but in my experience, I can only speak from my experience, and that is specifically through, well, fear that turns into sort of the fear of death, right? But the thing about death is it's not always literal, right? Death is that feeling of like the fear, when it's just like, oh, it's coming, coming. But when we surrender to that, it actually gives us a sense of peace because it's like, oh, I'm not in control. But that's fine because when we are in control, what happens is like it's almost like saying, I want to be in control of a river. I want to control my breath. If you try holding your breath, you know you're not going to be able to hold on to it for long. And then your body will just say, oh, you want to die? Okay, then fine. That's the way the universe works. If we want to control things, then that's what we're going to get. We're going to get control and we're going to get, um, exactly what we want. But then as a result, there's no longer flow. And that's part of death is a part of that process. Death is not an end, as you probably already heard. It's a transition. But we have this perception again. We're stuck in this perception as humans that we have this body that we're attached to, right? From birth, we are attached to it, or rather, not birth, sorry. We develop this attachment to the body as if that's the reality. Actually, when we're born, we're actually coming out of that death sort of experience and we're coming into life. What I mean by that is we know that there is timelessness. We come from a place of timelessness. We come from a place of unconditional love. We come from a place of temporariness, that things are just as they are. But then all of a sudden, boom. Um, I think the reason why I got that quick thing about it's I was told quickly that it's like that we are born into attachment Now that sounds weird, I know. But I'm like, how are you attached as a baby? Well, you're not attached to the baby, it's not a perception, but there is an instinctive attachment because instinct is survival, right? So it's instinct is just a natural response to attachment to form, but it's not really attachment per se. Because what happens is, when you're in the womb, the baby is reliant on the mother or the body that it's in. So it's reliant on the nutrients. So it's part of the instinct. It's part of survival. It's part of living. That's what that was. That was it was. But then, so when they die into birth, into a different form, that's what it is, right? So before the baby was born, it was different. It's energy, but it's represented through the physical body and how two people make babies. Right? So, or however that process happens, right? It's a form of creation. Real creation comes from a dying process into something else. When I say dying, I mean the transition. So we're looking at something like you're drawing something, literally something like you're drawing something, you're playing music. You're going from something that feels like nothing, okay, but it's actually energy, that is an idea, it's perception, and it's perception or perspective. It's like onto a piece of paper, onto a canvas, onto a sheet of music, onto the dance floor, whatever the form of creativity is. It could be just building something, it could be having a conversation with someone. Real creative process is actually a deathly experience. I know that sounds weird, but okay. But in turn, death also leads to presence. So the way I see it is because I have a Sun Pluto conjunction. I'll show you in here. Um, yeah. So you see in my chart, let's go to this one first. Okay, I have Sun Pluto conjunction right there. So I constantly learn from ego death. And what that means with it, because what happens is that Pluto rules um, power struggles, but Pluto rules transformation, right? So it's very much tied to Scorpio, although planets and signs don't exactly share the same exact things. Like Pluto is not completely about how is this different? Pluto is more about the power. Scorpio is more about catharsis. There is a link, but in terms of like the words that are used in astrology, it's not that exactly close, but it is. There are similarities. There's always similarities with anything. So there you go. So with the Sun Pluto conjunction there, plus it's trine my moon, so which means there's a flow. Okay. Plus my moon is in the eighth house. Okay, that's ruled by Scorpio. And my so Pluto it's conjunct the Pisces, so it's an inner self thing, but it's in a deep house. It's the water house. It's in a house of endings. So that's DNA. That's the fourth house right here. It's DNA. It's heritage, inheritance, that kind of like deeper stuff. Like when you're sitting in a place of privacy, when you feel like you're really at home, at your best because you're private. Nobody else is looking. That's exactly what it is. So it's tied to both um, water houses. Okay. There's very deep, profound changes through the Plutonian uh, archetype. Okay. So now Pluto rules all that. Pluto rules death for sure, because it is tied to power. When you have power over someone, it feels like they're like, oh my goodness, it's intimidating, right? I've been told that I'm intimidating. I try not to do it that much. I've really shifted, so I've had a lot of deaths. Okay, I've had a lot of um, fears, a lot of like letting go, a lot of release, a lot of like all that stuff. It's still ongoing. Okay, but what happens with the thing about powerlessness, because it is about power. Um, one of the things I've learned is when you feel powerless, you actually feel like you are dying. But powerlessness, when you go beyond that, beyond the feeling of death and you really surrender, like in the form of sort of to the point where you feel reverence, you feel humble. And it's actually a surrendering process. But and then when you're in that surrendering process and that humility and reverence, you have this sort of like just the inner knowing. Okay. Um, It's an inner knowing that it's like, okay. And it teaches you presence. Um, Especially for me when I started doing the Wim Hof method, doing the breathing first and followed by the shower. I do it every day, literally every day. I don't go without it. It's just a habit now. I love it. And you go into the cold and you just surrender, right? Especially if it's like colder, like in terms like ice baths. Yeah, you really surrender to it and you just sit there and you're just like, oh, you realize everything is actually okay. So you become in the moment. You become present. You just be. Okay. I actually wrote down some notes here. I said, so the key here is to let that essence of that inner desire to have power and control, and let it tell you that action eventually will be taken so that surrender does take place. Okay. And when you have that surrender, then you have awareness. And therefore, this death of attachment to that belief that you had earlier about powerlessness. So all you got to do is release that by continuing surrender to it, surrender to it, surrender to it, surrender to it, surrender to it. It's some people just really have a hard time. I know I've met some people like that, and they just don't want to surrender to the emotions. They feel like the emotions are them, but it's like, it's not you. You are not the emotions. The key is not about what I tell you. The key is for you to experience it yourself. How do you know what's outside of that box? How do you know what's outside of that boundary unless you walk it? But it's easier said than done, I know. But that's the thing about this whole process. When we're afraid, sometimes eventually life will force us to. The way life forced me to is when I didn't listen to my body, when I used to consume food and caffeine and left, right, center, and it was just extreme. I used to have moments like at least maybe once a month. There's like this one year where I ate an entire, almost two large boxes of pizza. You know how much sodium is in just one slice? Uh-huh. It's a lot. So, I mean, we're talking about, I mean, that's the system. That's what they do. And I realized, I'm like, why do I need to be part of that? But I was part of that because I thought that by eating myself to happiness was the key. Because when you're enjoying things, you're like, "Meh," but it's very temporary. But irony here is ironic. The irony here is that that sort of temporariness is exactly what's going to lead to something else that's permanent. But what needs to be done is the opposite. We need to go into getting into the permanent by releasing the temporary, if that makes sense. Okay. So how this is tied to Pluto is that when you have that powerlessness and you go beyond that, you release the temporary. And then when you release the temporary, when you see that you are actually in that humble position, that humble state of being, I just call it humble. Could be many things. To me, it's that energy. Okay. It's the wording I put in it. Okay. Is You'll see your sense of true freedom there because you're just the present moment. You're just there. You are breathing. You're like, oh, I actually exist. And Bashar puts it this way too. But we know this instinctively. We know this. No, not know this, but we know this. Okay. That it is it is life itself. And we're breathing it and I exist. So the fact that you're worthy, the fact that you're alive means that you're worthy. So Bashar puts it that way. It made total sense to me. He said, I'm going to stop sharing for a second here. He said, if you try to imagine non-existence, it would not work. Because if you try to imagine non-existence, meaning if you imagine it to be true of yourself, like as I don't exist, what happens is how can you even have the question that you don't exist if you do not exist? You see how ironic that is? So the fact that you exist means that there is no such thing as non-existent. You are of eternal existence. You are it. You are you are isness. Okay. So I think that was a beautiful thing. And just like, oh wow. So I mean, I am infinite. I There's a haha moment. It's like, wow, I am not giving over my sovereignty, my infiniteness to this little tiny thing about self-victimization, pettiness. I'm not giving over to that one because why? Why would I? So, I mean, there are things like when we think about like physical limitations, because that's what happened. It's fine. That's what it is. But having that infiniteness means that it doesn't mean that I need to go back to having high sodium diets. I need to go back to eating meat, for example, or I don't know, because that's not what honoring the body is. Infinite means there is this possibility of changing my perception of what happened and therefore what I am to do now and what is to be, linearly speaking. By the way, there is infiniteness in the first, like, so why would I surrender to being trapped into I'm only going this way? It's like trying to streamline rivers and going only in one direction. How is that? How is that natural? How is that infinite? If you look at rivers, rivers don't just go in one direction because you think it's only going in one direction, because you believe that it's like, oh, it's only in one way or my way or the highway. How is that? How is that? Like, it completely doesn't make sense, right? It's like saying I only need to want, I only want one finger. I only want one color of skin. I want the perfect skin, no wrinkles, nothing. It's like saying I might as well be just one tube. And like, huh? It doesn't make sense. One tube, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. It's like saying, if you try to control anything that you control, anything that you streamline, anything that you're trying to like that, there's a reason for control. There's a purpose for that. And that's just like really about focus. But what happens is when there's too much focus, all it is a boundaries, which is a Saturn thing, which is probably for another time, right? And there are a bunch of asteroids too that relate to Saturn. If you try to streamline things, something so much, it doesn't make sense. It's not going to work. You can support it. That's all it is. But really, what it is support. Right? Boundaries, streamlining things, control is support. It's not really control. Control doesn't have to be control. It can just be streamlining. It could be, well, I guess streamlining. So maybe yeah, streamlining, but it could be just a form of support. It's like, you walk out there and it's like you might as well walk in a sided bubble, like, just like what happened during the pandemic, because there's so much. That's exactly what I'm talking about here with Pluto. So let's go back into Pluto here. So Pluto is exactly that, right? There are other places, there are other asteroids. One of them is Orcus, but Orcus is more about integrity, knowing what you want, things you agree to. It's a bit like the seventh house. There's Ixion, which is about eternal, actual bliss, like true bliss. But what happens with Ixion is that suffering happens when we try to force bliss on not only others, but also on ourselves, as if it's like, I have to have it my way or the highway, right? And Core is also kind of like she's all about transformation. If we don't live life, how do we know if we're transforming? How do we know if we're experiencing something? Because you can't go out there. It's like saying, like, I know about life because I read it in a book. That's not core. Okay. Apophis is long haul processing. Okay. Being kind of being ostracized and demonized. That is Apophis. Okay. So that's another one. That's an asteroid actually. Uh, Eris is a high vibration of Pluto, which makes more sense in terms of release. But Eris is more about the catalyst challenges. He's going like, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? It's very Libra. It's actually the modern ruler of Libra, at least for me, it is. Secondary is Venus, because not all stuff from Venus applies to Libra as well. Like, I mean, you know, for example, like, what is Venus about? Um, Actually, no, it's a lot of Libra. What is this? Yes, there is pleasure, but Venus is relationships, but it's not really about There's something else about Venus. There's a certain feel to Venus that's not completely Libra. Anyways, I digress. There's also Sedna. If you look at the mythology, fingers are and she released herself, ended up in the ocean. Because and then she released. So she released, right? It's kind of like that. That release itself. There's also series, which is kind of like it's somewhat like that too. She learned how to accept the cycles of life, the ups and downs, life and death. So it's pretty much tied to that as well. There is another bunch of other asteroids if you are curious about that. Oh, um, what happened there? Let me 1 second. I think it's this one. Uh-huh. Let me open this one. Okay. All right, here. So there's also a bunch of asteroids too. They have Thora, which is Thor. Lilith is a big one too. Lilith is like Pluto. Okay. Baldur, uh, he's about short-lived things like being shot as well. There's something else about him, but he is about like death, being shot. So there's Janira as well, which is like um unconscious unconscious uh, it's like unintended murders, or like it's basically a death by trusting too much. But there's just a lesson to be learned about that too. Adonis is also death. He's so a lot of the asteroids here are about death. There's also Tyr, which is about war, which just leads to dying. There's Persephone, which is, from mythology, Persephone was raped, okay, or and taken away from Hestia, okay. So she had to live in the underworld half of the time. So she's tied to Hestia, her mother. Tezcatlipoca is also about death, transformation. Hecate, okay, Hecate. She's also about timelessness, past, present, future. Aten is uh, also about that, life, death, and rebirth. Perun is also similar to that. Osiris is definitely life, death, and rebirth, but more like replacements. Odin has to be about release by sacrificing something to gain actual higher knowledge. Sisyphus is this hard work that you have to put in, but eventually giving into the absurdities and the, how ridiculous things are if you try to keep pushing things. Ate she's the daughter of Eros, but she's about chaos because so she's also about that. Sappho, surprisingly, is also about that. She was thrown off a cliff. So it's ostracism, specifically for being of pure love and specifically like same gender love. Okay, so this, by the way, shows that I'm so gay. Okay, that's how I discovered. It's like, oh yeah, there's right there. Alcesti is partially about that as well. I don't remember. Lamea is definitely for sure because she's complete dissatisfaction and suffering from loss of children. So Lamea is teaching you all those things. Phaedra is about shame. Quetzalcoatl is similar to, I think, Orcus. He's about matter. He's the god of matter, I believe. And then there's Nephthys. She's also about transformation. The Slavic god Radagast. That's also that. Cerberus is the boundaries, having boundaries and having limitations because you're afraid of what's ahead. It's kind of like Saturn. Chiron is, we already know, Chiron is also definitely that, but he's all about integration. Chaos is the primordial energy. Chaos is not an asteroid, actually. Chaos is a dwarf planet, or is it a Kubawano? Either way, it's a TNO, trans-Neptunian object. Okay, it's out there. So he's the void, primordial void. I love chaos, actually. Um, and that's a release, that's that whole thing. Anubis is also like that. But Anubis is a bit of a control. Okay. There's hell. Hell is absolutely just almost like Pluto, pretty much like Pluto as well. Okay. So there's several. Oh, there's also this other dwarf planet. It's a binary dwarf. planets. So more Somnus is this combination. I'm recently doing my research on them. And Gilgamesh is also that, and then Astraea. So there's a lot of asteroids you can work with. So you'll notice it's in different houses in my chart, so it's going to be the same in anyone's chart. Okay. Sometimes you'll be clumped up into one whole like area, maybe two houses, three houses, something like that. Again, depends on the planetary alignments of the time of your birth. Okay. But also to look at one thing to look at is also it's not just because of the bodies themselves. You shouldn't just rely on, oh, this is what it is, and that's what it is, and that's it. Um, it's not that narrow. So we want to also look at if it's a square, if it's any of the hard aspects, opposition, square. Square is a big one. It means the lesson will be kind of harder to learn. But if it's a conjunction, the lessons are easier to learn, but it's still going to be hard, depending on the energies you're referring to, the of the archetypes, right? Um, if it's in like one of those benefic planets, like what's a benefic planet? Like Jupiter and what's the other benefic planet? Uh, it's not Venus. Venus is a neutral. They have all these terms. Benefic just means it helps you. Um, I believe Mercury is, I don't remember. I think Uranus is also. No, that's dynamic. Mars and Uranus are dynamic planets. But anyways, there's these bunch of terms. So anyways, so I kind of digressed a little bit there. So if you want to look at those, you can. But just make sure that, when you do these things, do a bit of your own research. Watch my video on like how to get started. No problem. Like, and there's a bunch of videos that I will be posting as well. You'll see, or you probably have seen by now. There's different, by the time you read this or by the time you watch this, there's going to be different videos. So I don't know if I made sense there, but thank you for watching. If you ever have any comments regarding like there's things you don't understand, please comment down below, ask questions, connect, flow. Otherwise, you're just making assumptions, to be honest. Right. But I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying sometimes it's good to know and to kind of be clear about what it is that you yourself want to actually make part of your own journey, if that makes sense. Okay. So again, I think that was it for now. Yeah, that's it. So Pluto is a definite one that I find for myself that is a good release. It helps us. And that's it for now. Sorry, wow, longer video than I thought. Okay. Again, if you have any questions or comments, write it down below and like and subscribe. Thank you again for watching. I will see you guys later.